Can Vanderbilt get to back-to-back bowl games and finally get a win in the postseason? Find out here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.
Derek Mason has been to just 2 bowl games and has compiled a 24-38 record going into his 6th season at Vanderbilt. And last year's bowl appearance certainly saved Derek Mason's job going into this season, but a lackluster performance in 2019 could spell the end of the Derek Mason era in Nashville. And the Commodores certainly have some huge shoes to fill going into 2019, none bigger than their all-time leading passer in Kyle Shurmur. The Commodores returned 7 starters offensively and bring in a transfer quarterback in Riley Neal from Ball State. And while he put up solid numbers with the Cardinals in the MAC, the SEC is a much different and much tougher conference than the MAC. So it'll be interesting to see how Riley Neal fares in his first year as starter and lone year as starter for the Commodores, and how he gels with their top 2 wide receivers in Kalijah Lipscomb and Jared Pinkney. But we all know that Vanderbilt's offense will not rely on the pass in 2019. We all know that the leader of this Vanderbilt offense is Ke'Shawn Vaughn, who rushed for over 1,200 yards last year and averaged an absurd 7.9 yards per carry in 2018. So he will absolutely be the leader of this offense. But if he gets shut down, especially early on in the season against some tough defenses, hopefully Riley Neal can pick it up in the passing game. Defensively, Vanderbilt only returns 5 starters, and usually the Commodores are known for their defense, as they usually have been under Derek Mason. But they lose 4 of their top 5 tacklers. Luckily, they get Dimitri Moore back at linebacker. He was the number 2 tackler for the Commodores last year, but there are a lot of sophomores and juniors on this defensive side of the ball. Only 1 projected senior starter in 2019. So this is still a fairly young Vanderbilt defense, and it'll be interesting to see how they fare in 2019. Unfortunately for them, they open up the season right in the middle of SEC play, hosting the reigning SEC East champions, the Georgia Bulldogs. And the past couple of years, Georgia has not been very kind to Vanderbilt. The Commodores have lost the past 2 by a combined score of 86-27. This year, the Bulldogs have their eyes set on not just winning the SEC, but making a return trip to the college football playoff and finally winning the national championship game. They return Jake Fromm at quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the entire nation. DeAndre Swift back at running back. I'm going to be excited to watch Ke'Shawn Vaughn going up against DeAndre Swift in this game. But their defense will once again be elite under Kirby Smart. I don't think Vanderbilt has much of a chance in this game, not with breaking in a new quarterback, not with the defense having to replace a lot of people and a lot of stars from last year. Vanderbilt falls at home to the Bulldogs, a team that I don't see losing very much this year, if at all, in 2019. They then go on the road against Purdue, and if you look at Vanderbilt's schedule, you can see how unkind this first half of the schedule is for them. Yes, they get to host their first 4 of their 5, but one of them's against Georgia, and another one's against LSU, 2 of the best teams in the entire SEC. But they have an out-of-conference game against Purdue, and that, of course, is not an easy out-of-conference game. Purdue was phenomenal last year, winning 7 games, getting to the postseason before falling to Auburn. They went 6 games before falling to Auburn. And, of course, Elijah Sindelar is back at quarterback alongside Rondale Moore, one of the most explosive players in the entire nation. Now, the offense only returns 3 starters, which helps out this Vanderbilt defense. But their defense, Purdue's, returns 9 starters. I think with this game being on the road at Purdue, I think the Boilermaker defense steps up, shuts down Riley Neal, which will force Vanderbilt to try to win this game on the ground. And in my opinion, it's much harder to win a game on the ground than it is through the air, making a team one-dimensional. Purdue gets a key out-of-conference win against a quality Power 5 opponent from the SEC. Vanderbilt starts 0-2. They get a big-time bye week going into their road game or home game against LSU. And like I said, it's unfortunate for them because LSU will be one of the best teams in the SEC in 2019. And I don't see many teams scoring much against LSU this year, not with one of the best secondaries in the entire nation with Grant Delpit, Christian Fulton, and Derek Stingley. And of course, their offense took a major stride last year with the addition of transfer quarterback Joe Burrow. They'll be even better this year in 2019. LSU is an SEC title contender and a college football playoff contender. So even though Vanderbilt gets to host this game, even though they're coming off a weaker rest here, LSU should come into Nashville and take fairly easy care of the Commodores, much like I think they'll do to the majority of the teams they face in 2019. Vanderbilt starting the season off 0-3. Of course, not the way that they want to start, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles and the way the scheduling worked out for them. Very unfortunate. They get their first win at home, though, against Northern Illinois, another out-of-conference game there. So they are 1-3. They've got a win on the board. They then go on the road to face off against Ole Miss. And last year, Vanderbilt won that game 36-29 in Nashville in overtime. And some might like to think that was a controversial ending, say what you want, but Vanderbilt got that win, and it was key for them in terms of getting to the postseason. This year, Ole Miss, like Vanderbilt, loses a lot of star power, including their quarterback Jordan Ta'amu and two phenomenal wide receivers in DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown. But they do return 10 starters on the defensive side of the ball, and Matt Liu impressed the heck out of me, bringing in Rich Rodriguez as offensive coordinator and Mike McIntyre as defensive coordinator. While I don't have very high expectations for Ole Miss this year, with this game being in Oxford, with this team having two very experienced coaches on their staff as assistants and coordinators, I think Vanderbilt falls to the Rebels, a team certainly looking to get revenge as well after that heartbreaking loss last year. So Vanderbilt takes another loss here. They are 1-4. But they're 2-4. We're going to give them a win over UNLV. Certainly not a surefire victory. We put it down as one. They can't afford to overlook them, much like they have struggled against some teams in the past, namely like Western Kentucky, who took them to overtime a few years ago. But UNLV should be a win for Vanderbilt. They're 2-4, still in the hunt for a bowl game. Season's still fairly young. They're about halfway through. Then they get Missouri at home. And of course, I think this is a winnable game for Vanderbilt. I think they have a solid chance at upsetting the Tigers, a team that I do think could win anywhere from 8 to 10 games in 2019. And a lot of that is due in part to the transfer quarterback. You've heard us say that a lot, but the transfer quarterback in Kelly Bryant coming over from Clemson. We saw how dynamic Missouri's offense has been the past few years when Drew Lock was at the helm. Now you've got a Kelly Bryant quarterback who led Clemson to the college football playoff a few years ago before losing out on the job to Trevor Lawrence. But this Missouri team is going to be one of the best yet under Barry Odom, and even though this game is in Nashville, even though Vanderbilt only lost 33-28 last year to the Tigers, I just don't see them pulling off this upset at home. They're going to want it, and coming off a win against UNLV, where they could rest their starters, I think they'll be pumped and keep this game close. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Kelly Bryant is able to scorch this Vanderbilt team, especially on the ground. As a dual-threat quarterback, that's the difference maker, and Vanderbilt drops a game to Missouri. They then get another bye week, but unfortunately for their bye weeks, they don't come into games that are favorable for Vanderbilt. This one bye week here early on leads into a game against LSU, one of the toughest teams to beat in the nation, I think, and then a bye week going on the road to South Carolina, Williams-Brice Stadium. First off, not an easy place to play. Second off, South Carolina, a very experienced team in 2019. But as I've said about Texas A&M, South Carolina is a team that has a lot of talent this year. It just might not show because the Gamecocks have the toughest schedule in the entire nation. This game on the road for Vanderbilt, I do not see them beating South Carolina. The Gamecocks are going to need every win they can get against a winnable opponent. This is one of them against Vanderbilt. On the road for Vanderbilt, don't see it happening. Jake Bentley has himself a day against the Commodores, and Vanderbilt drops yet another game, and a bowl berth is looking very bleak for them in 2019. They then go on the road against Florida, and we can probably mark that down as a loss here. Now, some people will say Florida's going to have one of those let-down games in 2019. I don't think it's going to come at home to Vanderbilt. But do keep in mind that last year, Vanderbilt led Florida 21-3 in Nashville before losing 37-27. So a huge swing in momentum there for the Gators and could have been a monumental upset in 2018. But this Florida team is even better than they were last year. Felipe Franks is the real deal. A lot of people don't like to think that he is, but I think Dan Mullen's doing a phenomenal job reading that quarterback, and the defense, despite losing people to the transfer portal, is still going to be one of the best in the SEC. Vanderbilt will fall on the road to Florida this year, much due in part to being in the slump and to Florida's defense against an offense in Vanderbilt. Like I said, I love Vaughn and I love the wide receivers, but still has questions at the quarterback position. Whether or not Riley Neal clicks early on could be the determining factor in whether Vanderbilt wins some of these tossed-up games and gets to the postseason or not. They then get Kentucky at home. And this is one of those games that I mentioned that is very winnable for Vanderbilt in 2019. Last year against Kentucky, Vanderbilt only lost 14-7. And that, first off, sounds fairly impressive considering Kentucky won 10 games. But it hurts for Vanderbilt fans to know that they lost 14-7 and Kentucky only had 18 passing yards on the day. So a game dominated by the rushing game, of course, led by Benny Snell last year. No surprise. But now Benny Snell is gone. Josh Allen, the leader of that Wildcats defense, is gone. They're going to have to rely, we said Vanderbilt will rely on the run, and now Kentucky's going to have to rely on the pass. It's kind of a flip-flop from what happened in 2018. Benny Snell was phenomenal last year. No doubt in my mind, we all saw it. But Terry Wilson was kind of lackluster at quarterback. Unless he takes major strides forward, I think Vanderbilt gets the win at home against Kentucky. And I'm going to give them their first SEC win of the season here. And they're sitting there now with 4 wins on the season. So they're obviously out of bowl eligibility. That Florida game will take them out of that. They have 4 wins, but of course a chance to get a win on the road against Tennessee, their heated rival. And as we've said, whenever it comes to rivalry games, you throw records out the window. So despite only having 4 wins, you can toss this record out the window when they're facing the Volunteers. Vanderbilt has won the past 3 games against Tennessee by an average of 18 points, which is pretty hard to believe. So considering the past couple of years, especially a couple of years ago, Tennessee was one of the most highly anticipated and highly hyped teams in the entire nation, of course, having a major letdown under Butch Jones. But this Tennessee team is very, very young. Despite returning 10 starters offensively, despite returning 6 starters defensively, this Tennessee team is very, very young. But Jeremy Pruitt showed me last year, even though they only won 5 games, showed me last year that he's got this Volunteers program on the right track. This game at Neyland Stadium, this much experience coming back, especially this much youth coming back for the Volunteers, leads me to believe that Jeremy Pruitt will get this Volunteers team to a bowl game in 2019, maybe winning as much as 7 or 8 games. This game at Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, Vanderbilt will follow their rival. Tennessee snaps their 3-game losing streak to Vanderbilt, and the Commodores finish the season 4-8. And of course, not what Vanderbilt fans want to hear. But once again, look at the schedule, look at the questions that the Commodores face in 2019, and tell me where you see potential wins for Vanderbilt on this schedule. They will not beat Georgia. I don't think they'll beat Purdue. They will not beat LSU. Maybe they snag a win against Missouri, and maybe you give them a win over South Carolina or Tennessee. The possibilities are there, and Derek Mason's going to need every win possible this year to keep his job, because a 4-8 season, I can almost guarantee, will end the Derek Mason era in 2019 in Nashville after making just 2 bowl appearances in 6 years. It's not going to cut it, especially in the rugged SEC. So guys, as always, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Go check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Gridiron Expert, and go to our official website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for our newsletter and sign up for our expert picks. For just $30, you will receive every single one of our 2019 college football spread picks, including the postseason. I can promise you that is a deal you do not want to pass up. So join our team and sign up today only at thegridironexpert.com. And guys, as always, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.